The sound of the auction gavel split the air like a bullet, silencing the crowd gathered in the dusty square of Dallas, Texas. Olivia Whitman stood on the wooden platform, hands bound before her, eyes fixed on the distant horizon as men shouted numbers that would determine her fate. The year was 1878, and she was being sold to the highest bidder like a prized mare at a livestock auction. $500 for the woman. Do I hear 600? The auctioneer's voice boomed across the square, his handlebar mustache twitching with excitement as the bidding war intensified. Olivia's golden hair hung loose around her shoulders, her once fine blue dress now faded and torn after weeks of captivity following the attack on her family's homestead. 600, shouted a portly man with yellowed teeth and wandering eyes. 700, countered another, his face scarred and menacing. Olivia closed her eyes, feeling the hot Texas sun beating down on her skin. Her parents were dead, her home burned to ash, and now her body was being bartered for in broad daylight. The law in these parts was whatever men with money decided it was, and she had no one to speak for her. $800. The new voice cut through the crowd like a knife, deep and commanding. The bidding fell silent as heads turned to find its source. Yates Vega stood at the back of the crowd, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the packed dirt. His dark hat shielded his eyes, but his jaw was set in determination. Unlike the others, he wasn't leering at Olivia. His gaze was steady, respectful, even as he placed another bid. $1,000, Yates said, his voice carrying without him having to shout. The auctioneer's eyes widened. 1,000. Do I hear more? Silence fell over the crowd. The sum was substantial, more than most men in attendance could afford to spend on what they viewed as a mere plaything or servant. Sold. To the gentleman in the back for $1,000. Olivia's heart sank as the transaction was completed. She'd be exchanging one prison for another, one master for another. As Yates approached the platform, spurs jangling with each step, she steeled herself for whatever was to come. The auctioneer shoved her forward. "She's yours now, mister. Do what you will with her." Yates's expression darkened at the man's callous words. He reached out, but instead of grabbing Olivia roughly as she expected, he produced a knife from his belt and cut the ropes binding her wrists. "Miss," he said quietly, "my name is Yates Vega. I own a ranch about 10 miles outside of town. I'd like to offer you a position there as a housekeeper, paid with your own quarters." He emphasized the last part clearly. "You're free to refuse, of course. If you'd prefer, I can give you enough money to take the next stage coach out of Texas." Olivia stared at him, disbelief etched across her face. "Why?" It was the first word she'd spoken all day, her voice hoarse from disuse. Yates glanced around at the dispersing crowd, some men casting disappointed looks their way. "No person should be sold like cattle. I couldn't stand by and watch." Olivia studied his face, the weathered skin that spoke of long days under the sun, the crow's feet-around eyes that held no malice, only concern. She had nowhere to go, no family to return to, and precious few options for a woman alone in the West. "I'll accept the position," she said finally. "Thank you, Mr. Vega." Yates nodded, offering her his arm. "My horse is tied up at the saloon. We can leave town right away if you're ready." As they walked through the streets of Dallas, Olivia felt the stares of the townsfolk following them. Some were curious, others judgmental, a few outright hostile. She kept her head high despite it all. "Don't mind them," Yates said. "People talk. It's about all some of them are good for." His horse was a magnificent black stallion, well-groomed and powerful. Yates helped Olivia mount before swinging up behind her. The proximity made her tense, but he kept a respectful distance as best he could given the circumstances. They rode in silence as Dallas fell away behind them, the landscape opening into rolling plains dotted with mesquite trees and prickly pear cactus. The oppressive heat of the day began to wane as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and reds. "Why were you at that auction?" Olivia finally asked, breaking the silence between them. Yates was quiet for a moment. "I was in town for supplies. Heard talk of a special auction at the square. Figured I should see what that was about." His voice hardened. "Wasn't expecting to see a woman being sold. That sort of thing isn't supposed to happen anymore, not even here. Those men who captured me, they said no one would care, that women are brought in from the East all the time to be sold." Olivia's voice was steady despite the horror of her words. "There are still pockets of lawlessness, especially in the territories. But Texas has been a state for more than 30 years. This kind of business should have been stamped out." Yates sighed heavily. "Sheriff Thompson's getting too old and too corrupt to enforce the law properly." The sun continued its descent, and Olivia felt the day's events catching up with her. The adrenaline that had kept her alert was fading, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion. Without meaning to, she leaned back against Yates's chest. "Sorry," she mumbled, trying to straighten. "It's all right," he said. "You've been through hell today. Rest if you need to. We're still an hour from the ranch." Olivia didn't remember dozing off, but she woke with a start when the horse slowed. They had arrived at a wooden arch with Vega Ranch burned into the crossbeam. Beyond stretched a modest but well-maintained property, a 2-story main house painted white with green shutters, a large barn, a bunkhouse, and several corrals. "This is it," Yates said, dismounting before helping her down. "It's not the biggest spread in Texas, but it's mine, free and clear." A woman emerged from the main house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her expression was suspicious as she approached. "Mrs. Abernathy," Yates called. "This is Miss Olivia Whitman. She'll be joining us as a housekeeper." "Mrs." Abernathy's eyes narrowed as she looked Olivia up and down. "Another mouth to feed, Mr. Vega, and in such a state. Where did you find this one?" "That's not important," Yates said firmly. "Miss Whitman needs a bath, clean clothes, and a hot meal. Can you see to that?" The older woman's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded curtly. "Come along then, girl." Olivia glanced at Yates, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Mrs. Abernathy is my cook and housekeeper. She's stern but fair. You'll be working alongside her." "Thank you again, Mr. Vega," Olivia said quietly before following Mrs. Abernathy toward the house. The older woman led her to a small but clean room at the back of the house. "This will be yours. There's a washroom down the hall. I'll bring you some clean clothes and prepare a bath." Left alone, Olivia sank onto the edge of the bed, her fingers tracing the simple quilt. A real bed with clean linens. A door she could close. It was more than she dared hope for when she stood on that auction block. Mrs. Abernathy returned with a stack of clothes and a wary expression. "Mr. Vega is a good man," she said without preamble. "Too good, sometimes. Brings in strays of all sorts. Last month it was a half-dead calf. Month before that, a ranch hand with a broken leg and nowhere to go." Her eyes bored into Olivia. "I don't know your story, and I don't need to. But if you're planning to take advantage of his kindness, you'll answer to me first." "I just want to work," Olivia said. "I have nowhere else to go." Something in her tone must have conveyed her sincerity because Mrs. Abernathy's expression softened slightly. "Well then, bath's ready. Dinner's in an hour. You look like you could use both." The hot bath was a luxury Olivia hadn't experienced in weeks. She scrubbed away the dirt and grime of her captivity, watching it swirl away in the bathwater. If only the memories could be washed away as easily. When she emerged, dressed in a simple blue calico dress that Mrs. Abernathy had provided, she felt somewhat human again. Dinner was served in the kitchen, a hearty beef stew with fresh bread. Yates sat at the head of the table, with Mrs. Abernathy to his right and Olivia to his left. Two ranch hands joined them, introducing themselves as Thomas and Frederick. They were polite but curious about the newcomer. "Miss Whitman will be helping Mrs. Abernathy with the house," Yates explained simply, offering no details about how she came to be there. The men seemed to accept this without question, though Olivia caught them exchanging glances. After dinner, Yates asked Olivia to join him on the porch. The night was clear, stars speckling the vast Texas sky like diamond dust. "I want to be clear about something," he said, leaning against the porch railing. "You're not beholden to me. The position is real and you'll be paid fairly. But if at any point you wish to leave, you're free to do so." "Why did you really buy me?" Olivia asked, the question that had been burning in her mind all day. Yates's expression grew distant. "My mother was Cherokee. My father was a Spanish trader. They fell in love, married properly, but that didn't matter to some. When I was 10, raiders attacked our settlement. They killed my father and took my mother." His voice grew tight. "By the time I found her, she had been sold 3 times. She was broken, died a year later." Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. But I swore I'd never stand by while something like that happened if I could stop it." He turned to face her fully. "I don't expect anything from you except honest work, Miss Whitman, and perhaps, in time, friendship. You can call me Olivia," she said softly, "and I'm grateful, truly. I'll work hard, I promise." Yates smiled, and for the first time Olivia noticed how it transformed his serious face, making him look younger, approachable. "Then welcome to Vega Ranch, Olivia. Get some rest. Tomorrow's a new beginning." That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in weeks, Olivia stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. From the depths of despair on the auction block to this strange new sanctuary, it felt unreal. She didn't know what the future held, but for tonight at least, she was safe. It was more than she'd had yesterday, and for now, that was enough. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. Olivia rose early each morning to help Mrs. Abernathy prepare breakfast for Yates and the ranch hands. There were now 4 men working the property: Thomas and Frederick, who lived in the bunkhouse, and 2 brothers named Samuel and Joseph, who rode in daily from their family's homestead, a few miles away. The work was hard but satisfying. Olivia learned to make bread that rose perfectly, to preserve fruits and vegetables for the winter months, to manage the household accounts that Mrs. Abernathy had previously handled. The older woman was gruff, but increasingly appreciative of Olivia's quick learning and willingness to work. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," Mrs. Abernathy commented one afternoon as they hung laundry in the hot Texas sun. "Better than most girls I've known." Olivia smiled. "My mother taught me to read and cipher when I was young. My father thought it was a waste of time for a girl, but she insisted." "Your mother was right," the older woman said. "A woman needs her own mind in this world. Men can't be counted on to do the thinking for us." She paused, wiping sweat from her brow. "What happened to your parents, if you don't mind my asking?" Olivia's hand stilled on the sheet she was pinning to the line. "We had a small farm in East Texas. 3 men came one night, said they were travelers needing shelter. My father was always hospitable to strangers." Her voice grew distant. "They waited until we were asleep, killed my parents, burned the farm, took me." Mrs. Abernathy's face softened with genuine sorrow. "I'm sorry, child. This country can be cruel to the trusting." "Yes," Olivia agreed quietly, "it can be." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of riders. Yates led the group, his hat pulled low against the sun. The men had been out since dawn, rounding up cattle that had strayed during a thunderstorm the previous night. Yates dismounted, leading his horse toward the women. "Ladies," he greeted them, tipping his hat. "That smells mighty fine, Mrs. Abernathy." "Beef stew and biscuits," the cook replied. "Miss Whitman made the biscuits herself. Girl's got a touch for pastry." Yates turned his gaze to Olivia, and she felt a flutter in her chest that was becoming increasingly familiar. "Is that so? I look forward to trying them." Over the past weeks, Olivia had come to know Yates better. He was a man of few words but deep thoughts. In the evenings, after the day's work was done, they often sat on the porch, sometimes talking, sometimes simply enjoying the quiet together. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, how he'd built it from nothing after years of working other men's land. She shared stories of her childhood, the books she'd read, the life she'd imagined for herself before tragedy struck. "You're different than I expected," Olivia told him one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues. "How so?" Yates asked, genuinely curious. "Most men I've known are simpler. They want what they want and take it if they can. You're thoughtful, patient." Yates considered this. "I've seen what impatience and greed can do. Taking without giving, forcing instead of earning it leads nowhere good." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Olivia looked away first, her cheeks warming. It wasn't proper, these feelings she was developing. He was her employer, her rescuer. She owed him too much to complicate matters with romantic notions. As summer gave way to autumn, the work on the ranch intensified. Cattle needed to be sorted and some driven to market before winter set in. Crops had to be harvested, meat smoked, and preserves put up. Olivia threw herself into the tasks, grateful for the distraction from her growing feelings for Yates. One crisp October morning, Mrs. Abernathy announced she needed to visit her sister in Fort Worth, who had fallen ill. "It'll be at least 2 weeks, maybe more," she told Olivia, packing a carpet bag with efficient movements. "Can you manage things here while I'm gone?" "Of course," Olivia assured her. "Don't worry about anything, just take care of your sister." After Mrs. Abernathy's departure, Olivia found herself suddenly responsible for the entire household. She rose even earlier, working from dawn until well after dusk to ensure everything ran smoothly. Yates noticed her exhaustion after a few days. "You're working too hard," he said, finding her in the kitchen well past midnight, kneading dough for the next morning's bread. "I'm fine," Olivia insisted, though her eyes were heavy with fatigue. "There's just so much to do without Mrs. Abernathy." "Let me help," Yates offered, rolling up his sleeves. Olivia laughed. "You, baking bread." "I lived alone for years before hiring Mrs. Abernathy," he reminded her. "I'm not completely useless in a kitchen." They worked side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing in the small space. Yates was surprisingly competent, following Olivia's instructions with careful precision. When the dough was finally ready and set to rise, they sat at the kitchen table, sharing a pot of tea. "Tell me something," Yates said, studying her face in the warm lamplight. "What did you dream of before all this happened? What kind of life did you want?" Olivia cradled her teacup, considering the question. "I wanted to teach, actually. I loved books, learning. I thought maybe I could open a small school someday." "You still could," Yates pointed out. "There's no school within 20 miles of here. The ranch hands children, the neighboring families, they all have to ride far for an education. Many don't bother." The idea took root in Olivia's mind, a tiny sprout of possibility. "Do you really think so?" "I think you can do anything you set your mind to, Olivia Whitman." The warmth in his voice made her heart skip. The next morning, disaster struck. Thomas burst into the house just after breakfast, his face ashen. "Mr. Vega, it's Frederick. His horse threw him in the south pasture. Looks bad." Yates was on his feet instantly. "Saddle my horse. Olivia, prepare a bed and hot water. We might need to send for the doctor in Dallas." By the time they carried Frederick into the house, the young man was pale and sweating, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. Olivia helped Yates cut away the pant leg, revealing a compound fracture, the bone protruding through the skin. "The doctor won't get here in time," Yates said grimly. "We need to set this now." Olivia swallowed hard. "I've assisted with setting bones before. My mother was known for her healing skills." Yates looked at her with new respect. "Tell me what to do." Together they worked to clean, set, and splint Frederick's leg. The young man passed out from the pain, which was a blessing. When they had done all they could, Yates sent Samuel to fetch the doctor anyway, to ensure the bone would heal properly. Exhausted, Olivia and Yates collapsed onto the porch steps. Their clothes were stained with blood, their faces drawn with the strain of the impromptu surgery. "You were incredible," Yates said softly. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My mother," Olivia explained. "She was half Comanche, knew more about healing than any doctor I ever met. She taught me what she could, though I don't have her gift." Yates reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek. "You have many gifts, Olivia." The air between them grew charged. Olivia found herself leaning toward him, drawn by something beyond her control. Their lips met in a tentative kiss, gentle at first, then deepening as Yates pulled her closer. When they broke apart, Olivia's heart was racing. "I shouldn't have," she began. "I've wanted to do that since the moment I helped you off that auction block," Yates admitted. "But I needed you to know that wasn't why I brought you here, that I wasn't expecting anything from you." "I know," Olivia whispered. "I've never felt pressured or obligated, that's why." She couldn't finish the thought, but she didn't need to. The truth was written in her eyes, in the way her fingers intertwined with his. The doctor arrived the next day, praised their work with Frederick's leg, and predicted a full recovery given time and rest. Life on the ranch continued, but everything had shifted. Yates and Olivia no longer hid their feelings, though they maintained propriety in front of the ranch hands. Mrs. Abernathy returned after 3 weeks, took one look at them, and harumphed knowingly. "About time," was all she said, reclaiming her kitchen with brisk efficiency. As Christmas approached, Yates began disappearing for hours at a time, returning with mysterious crates and packages that he refused to let Olivia see. On Christmas Eve, after a festive dinner with the ranch hands and their families, he asked her to accompany him on a ride. In the dark. "On Christmas Eve?" Olivia asked, puzzled. "Trust me," he said with an enigmatic smile. They rode double on his horse, Olivia nestled against Yates's chest for warmth in the chilly December air. He guided them to a small rise about a half-mile from the main house, where a tiny cabin stood that Olivia had never seen before. "What is this place?" she asked as he helped her dismount. "Come see." Yates led her inside, where a fire already burned in a small hearth, casting warm light over a single room furnished simply but thoughtfully. A desk stood by the window, shelves lined one wall and a blackboard hung on another. "Your school," Yates explained, watching her face carefully. "If you still want it." Olivia turned in a slow circle, taking in every detail. "You built this for me, for you, for the children who need learning, for the community." He took her hands in his. "I've spoken with several families. They're eager to send their children come spring. They'll pay what they can: eggs, milk, labor for the ranch. I'll cover the rest." Tears filled Olivia's eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll marry me," Yates said, dropping to one knee. He produced a simple gold band from his pocket. I love you, Olivia Whitman. I think I have since the moment I saw you standing tall despite everything on that auction block. You're the strongest, kindest, most remarkable woman I've ever known. Will you be my wife? Olivia's tears spilled over. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. Yates slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to kiss her deeply. When they separated, both breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. I promise to give you the freedom to be exactly who you are, to teach, to learn, to grow. I'll never cage you, Olivia, I swear it. I know, she said, wrapping her arms around him. That's why I love you. They were married on New Year's Day, 1879, in the parlor of the ranch house. The ceremony was small Mrs. Abernathy, the ranch hands, and a few neighboring families, but filled with genuine joy. The minister rode in from Dallas specially for the occasion, and even brought a gift: books for Olivia's new school. Winter passed in a blur of domestic bliss. Olivia and Yates moved into the master bedroom of the ranch house, their nights filled with discoveries about each other, their days with shared work and plans for the future. By March, when the first wildflowers began to dot the plains, Olivia's school was ready to open. 8 children arrived that first morning, ranging in age from 6 to 14. Their parents watched anxiously as Olivia welcomed each child, learning their names and assessing their knowledge. By noon, when the children broke for lunch, their excitement was palpable. Miss Olivia knows everything, 6-year-old Emma declared to her mother. She's teaching me to write my letters, and Johnny's learning multiplication, and Sarah's reading a real book. Olivia caught Yates's eye across the yard, her heart full to bursting with pride and gratitude. He winked at her, that slow smile spreading across his face, the smile that still made her pulse quicken after months of marriage. Spring turned to summer, and with it came news that changed everything once again. Olivia had suspected for weeks, but when the doctor confirmed it during his visit to check on Frederick's healing leg, joy bubbled up inside her like a spring. That evening, she prepared a special dinner, Yates's favorites, from steak to apple pie. When they were alone at last, she took his hand and placed it over her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby," she said softly, watching his expression transform from confusion to wonder to pure, unadulterated joy. Yates whooped so loudly that Mrs. Abernathy came running from her room, convinced something terrible had happened. When she heard the news, the usually stoic woman burst into tears and hugged them both. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and fall. Olivia continued teaching, though she agreed to reduce her hours as her condition advanced. The school had grown to 12 students, with more expected after harvest season. Yates hired an additional ranch hand, partly to help with the expanding herd and partly to free his own time to assist Olivia more. On a crisp November evening, exactly 1 year after Yates had proposed, Olivia went into labor. Mrs. Abernathy took charge, sending one of the ranch hands for the midwife who lived 10 miles away. Yates paced outside the bedroom, his usual calm deserting him entirely. After 12 hours of labor, their son was born, a healthy, lusty boy with a shock of dark hair and his father's serious expression. They named him Michael, after Yates's father. As Olivia cradled him to her chest, Yates sitting beside them on the bed, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. "A year ago I thought my life was over," she whispered, stroking the baby's soft cheek. "And now look at all we have." Yates kissed her forehead, then his son's. "You gave me a family," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Something I never thought I'd have." The years passed, bringing changes both expected and surprising. Michael was joined by a sister, Elena, 2 years later, and another brother, James, 2 years after that. Olivia's school grew into a proper building with 2 rooms and another teacher, a young woman named Clara who had trained in Boston and come west, seeking adventure. The Vega ranch prospered, expanding its boundaries and its herds. Yates's fair business practices and Olivia's community building through the school made them respected figures throughout the region. They helped other former slaves and captives establish themselves, creating a network of support and opportunity that gradually changed the character of the area. In 1888, 10 years after that fateful auction, Olivia received a letter that shook her to her core. It was from the Texas Rangers, informing her that they had captured 3 men suspected of murdering her parents and selling her into captivity. The Rangers requested her presence in Austin to identify them and testify at their trial. "I have to go," she told Yates that night after the children were asleep. He nodded, no hesitation in his response. "We'll go together." The journey to Austin was long but uneventful. They left the children in Mrs. Abernathy's capable hands, promising to return as soon as possible. Olivia grew quieter the closer they got to the capital. Memories she had worked hard to bury resurfacing with painful clarity. In a small room at the courthouse, Olivia faced the 3 men who had destroyed her first life. They were diminished, somehow older, haggard from years of outlaw living. One was missing an arm, another walked with a pronounced limp. They didn't look like the monsters of her nightmares. "Do you recognize these men?" the ranger captain asked gently. Olivia nodded, her voice steady when she spoke. "Yes. They are the men who murdered my parents and sold me into captivity." The trial lasted a week. Olivia testified calmly, recounting the horrors she had endured with a dignity that impressed the court. Yates sat in the gallery each day, his supportive presence giving her strength. When the verdict came guilty on all counts, sentences of hanging for all 3 men, Olivia felt not triumph, but a quiet closing of a terrible chapter. Outside the courthouse, Yates held her as she finally allowed herself to cry, not from grief or fear, but from relief and the strange emptiness that comes when long-held pain finally begins to dissipate. "Let's go home," she said when the tears had subsided. "I want to see our children." The return to the ranch was like emerging from a dark tunnel into sunlight. 8-year-old Michael ran to meet their wagon, his siblings toddling behind him. Mrs. Abernathy stood on the porch, trying to look stern but failing as a smile crept across her weathered face. That night, after the children were tucked in bed with extra stories and kisses, Olivia and Yates sat on the porch swing, her head resting on his shoulder as stars emerged in the vast Texas sky. "I've been thinking," Yates said, his deep voice rumbling against her ear, "about expanding the school." "Oh," Olivia lifted her head to look at him. "There are children from the Comanche and Cherokee communities who should have the chance to learn too. Mixed children like I was, who don't quite fit anywhere. What if we built dormitories, made it a proper boarding school? Open to all children, regardless of race or background." Olivia's eyes widened as the vision took shape in her mind. "It would take money resources. We have both now," Yates pointed out. "The ranch is doing well. We could start small, add to it over time." "The Vega School," Olivia said, testing the name. "I like it." They spent the rest of the evening refining the idea, planning and dreaming together as they had so many times before. This was the rhythm of their partnership. One would plant a seed of an idea, and together they would nurture it into something substantial. By their 15th wedding anniversary in 1894, the Vega School was a respected institution with 50 students from diverse backgrounds. Some paid tuition, others worked in exchange for their education, but all received the same quality of instruction. Olivia had assembled a staff of 4 teachers, each with specialties ranging from literature to mathematics to agricultural science. Michael, at 16, was showing his father's talent with horses and his mother's quick mind. He helped manage the ranch operations during school breaks, already talking about agricultural college back east. Elena, at 14, was artistic and dreamy, filling sketchbooks with detailed drawings of plants and animals. 12-year-old James was the family scholar, devouring books faster than Olivia could supply them, particularly anything about law or politics. On a warm spring evening, as they watched their children playing with the ranch dogs in the yard, Yates took Olivia's hand. "Do you ever think about that day in Dallas? The auction?" Olivia nodded slowly. "Sometimes. Less often now." She squeezed his fingers. "It's strange to think that the worst day of my life led me here, to all this happiness. I thank God every day that I decided to go into town for supplies that morning," Yates said. "That I overheard those men talking about the special auction if I'd been an hour later." "But you weren't," Olivia reminded him, pressing a kiss to his weathered cheek. "You were exactly where you needed to be, exactly when I needed you most." As the sun set over the Vega ranch, painting the buildings and pastures in gold and crimson, Olivia reflected on the journey from captive to teacher, from auction block to loving family. The West could be cruel, as she had learned in the harshest possible way, but it could also offer second chances, new beginnings, and the freedom to build something meaningful from the ashes of tragedy. In the distance, a group of riders approached neighbors coming for the community dance they hosted monthly in the schoolhouse. There would be fiddle music and laughter, children playing tag in the yard, couples young and old spinning across the floor. Life in all its messy, beautiful fullness. "Ready for the dance, Mrs. Vega?" Yates asked, offering his arm with a formal bow that made her laugh. "Always, Mr. Vega," she replied, taking his arm. "Always." 20 years after that fateful auction day, Olivia stood in the doorway of the expanded Vega school, watching as students filed in for the fall term. The original small cabin had grown into a proper campus, 3 classroom buildings, 2 dormitories, a dining hall, and staff quarters. Children of ranchers, farmers, merchants, and tribal families learned side by side, their differences celebrated rather than feared. Michael had returned from agricultural college back east with a degree, and a fiancée, a strong-minded young woman named Ruth, who shared his passion for innovative farming methods. They had built their own home on the northern edge of the ranch property, and were expecting their first child in the spring. Elena had surprised everyone by becoming an accomplished botanist. Her drawings of Texas plant life had caught the attention of a professor from the university in Austin, who had arranged for her work to be published in a scientific journal. At 24, she was corresponding with botanists across the country and planning an expedition to catalog the flora of West Texas. James, true to his childhood interests, had become a lawyer. After studying in Boston, he had returned to Texas and set up practice in Dallas, where he often represented the marginalized and disenfranchised. He had his father's sense of justice, and his mother's eloquence a powerful combination in the courtroom. Yates, now in his 60s, had gradually turned over the daily management of the ranch to Michael and Ruth, though he still rode out most mornings to check on the herds and chat with the hands. His hair had gone silver, the lines on his face deepened, but his eyes were as keen and kind as ever. He devoted much of his time to the school's board of trustees, using his business acumen to ensure its financial stability for generations to come. Mrs. Abernathy had passed away peacefully 5 years earlier, leaving a hole in their lives that could never quite be filled. She was buried in the small cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch, where wildflowers bloomed every spring. Olivia visited often, telling her old friend about the children's accomplishments and the school's growth, certain somehow that the formidable woman was still listening, still judging, still caring in her gruff way. As the last student entered the building, Olivia felt a familiar presence at her side. Yates slipped his arm around her waist, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Proud of you," he murmured. "Look at what you've built." "What we've built," Olivia corrected, leaning into his solid warmth. At 48, her golden hair now streaked with silver, she had lost none of her determination or passion for education. "None of this would exist without you." They stood together, watching as their youngest teacher, a former student who had gone on to college with their sponsorship, rang the bell to start classes. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Olivia asked, turning to face her husband. "On the auction block." Yates's brow furrowed. "I don't believe I said anything to you there. It wasn't until we were away from the crowd that I spoke." "Exactly," Olivia said with a smile. "You didn't treat me like property. You didn't boast or threaten or command. You cut my bonds and offered me a choice." She reached up to touch his cheek, her fingertips tracing the familiar contours of his face. "That was when I first began to hope again, though I didn't recognize it at the time." Yates turned his head to kiss her palm. "I was terrified," he admitted. "Afraid you'd see a stranger, just another man with money to buy what he wanted. I didn't know how to make you understand I wanted to help, not own." "You figured it out rather well," Olivia laughed softly. "And look where it led us." They walked hand in hand back to the ranch house, which had expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family and frequent guests. The wide porch where they had spent so many evenings now boasted comfortable chairs and potted plants, a place where grandchildren played and friends gathered. That evening, as had become their custom on the first day of each school term, they hosted a dinner for the teachers and staff. The dining room buzzed with conversation plans for the term, stories of summer adventures, discussions of new teaching methods. Olivia moved among her colleagues, offering encouragement here, advice there, feeling the deep satisfaction of meaningful work shared with kindred spirits. Later, when the guests had departed and the house grew quiet, Olivia found Yates in his study. He sat at his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, reviewing the ranch accounts by lamplight. She paused in the doorway, taking a moment to simply look at him, this man who had saved her life in more ways than one, who had built a world with her where both could thrive. "Come to bed, love," she said softly. "The numbers will wait until morning." Yates looked up, his face softening at the sight of her. He removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Just finishing up. Michael's idea for rotating the grazing areas is working beautifully. The southern pastures have recovered completely." Olivia crossed to stand behind him, her hands massaging his shoulders. "He learned from the best. He has good instincts, Ruth too." Yates closed the ledger and stood, turning to face her. "I received a letter from James today. He's coming for a visit next week. Says he has news." "Do you think he's finally going to propose to that suffragist he's been courting?" Olivia asked, hope in her voice. Their youngest had been smitten with a fiery young woman who organized for women's voting rights, but had been hesitant to commit. "We'll see," Yates said with a smile. "He's as cautious in love as he is bold in the courtroom." They walked upstairs together, arms around each other's waists, comfortable in the intimacy built over decades of partnership. Their bedroom, with its large windows overlooking the ranch, was their sanctuary, a place where they could be simply Olivia and Yates, not the respected Mrs. Vega and the successful rancher, not the school founder and the community leader. As they prepared for bed, Olivia caught Yates watching her, a familiar warmth in his gaze. "What is it?" she asked, meeting his eyes in the mirror as she brushed her hair. "Just thinking about how beautiful you are," he said simply. "How lucky I am." "Charmer," she accused, but her smile belied the mock criticism. 20 years of marriage had not dimmed the spark between them. If anything, their connection had deepened, tempered by shared joys and sorrows, strengthened by challenges met together. As they lay in bed, the soft sounds of the Texas night drifting through the open window, Yates pulled Olivia close. "You know what day it is?" he asked. Olivia thought for a moment. September 15th. Oh, realization dawned. It's exactly 20 years since the auction. 20 years since I found you, Yates corrected gently. Since our lives changed forever. Olivia rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "From slavery to this," she mused. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it's real." "It's real," Yates assured her, his fingers combing through her silver-streaked hair. "Every moment, every day, every year we've built together." As sleep began to claim her, Olivia murmured, "Thank you for buying my freedom." Yates pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You've more than repaid me, love. You gave me a future I never dared imagine." The years continued to flow, bringing changes both welcome and difficult. Michael and Ruth's family grew to include 3 children, all with their grandfather's dark hair and their grandmother's curious minds. Alina married a fellow botanist she met during her expedition, a quiet, thoughtful man who looked at her plant drawings as if they were priceless art. James did indeed marry his suffragist, and they divided their time between Dallas and Austin, fighting for justice in the courts and equality at the ballot box. The century turned, bringing with it new inventions and ideas. The railroad came closer to their part of Texas, making travel easier but also bringing more people, more change to the once remote area. Automobiles began to appear on the roads, kicking up dust and frightening the horses. Electric lights were installed in Dallas, and Yates talked of bringing the technology to the ranch someday. Through it all, the Vega ranch and school remained constants, evolving, growing, but true to the vision of their founders. By 1910, the school had grown to over 100 students and was known throughout Texas as a place where education transcended the barriers of race, gender, and class that still divided much of society. Olivia, now in her 60s, had gradually stepped back from daily teaching but remained the school's heart and soul. Her office was always open to students seeking guidance or staff needing support. She authored a series of readers that presented history from multiple perspectives, including those traditionally overlooked, and saw them adopted by schools throughout the Southwest. Yates, approaching 70 but still straight-backed and clear-eyed, had handed over ranch operations entirely to Michael but continued to serve as an advisor when asked. He devoted himself to the local cattlemen's association, advocating for sustainable practices and fair treatment of workers. Together with James, he worked to improve legal protections for all Texans, regardless of background. Their 30th wedding anniversary was celebrated with a grand gathering at the ranch family. Friends, former students, and staff coming from near and far to honor the couple whose vision had transformed so many lives. Tables were set up under the old oak trees, lanterns hung from the branches to illuminate the festivities as evening fell. Michael offered a toast, raising his glass to his parents. To 2 people who taught us all what it means to see possibility where others see only problems. Who showed us that compassion isn't weakness, but the greatest strength of all. Alina added her own tribute, her botanical training evident in her metaphor. Like master gardeners, You created fertile ground where all kinds of people could put down roots and grow toward the light. James, the orator of the family, spoke last. The law books talk about justice, but you live it every day. You've never just accepted the world as it is. You've always worked to make it what it should be. As guests mingled and music played, Yates led Olivia away from the crowd, down a familiar path to the small rise where he had proposed 3 decades earlier. The original schoolhouse still stood there, preserved as a monument to their beginnings. In the moonlight, they sat on the simple wooden bench outside the door. 30 years, Olivia marveled, her hand in his. If someone had told me on that auction block what my life would become. You wouldn't have believed them, Yates finished for her. Neither would I. He looked out over their land, the ranch buildings, the school campus, the homes of their children and grandchildren. We built something good, live. Better than good, she corrected. Something that will outlast us. They sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the sounds of celebration drifting up from the main house. Their life together hadn't been without challenges, droughts that threatened the ranch, opposition to the school's inclusive policies, illness and loss along the way. But they had faced each difficulty as they had faced that first crisis together, with determination and faith in each other. What do you think happens next? Yates asked, his tone contemplative. For the ranch, for the school when we're gone, Olivia considered the question. Michael and Ruth will keep the ranch thriving. They understand the land, respect it. The school. She smiled. Did you know Clara's daughter has applied to Teachers College? She says she wants to come back, teach where her mother taught. And 3 of our former students are on the board of trustees now. They understand what we built and why. They'll protect it. And our grandchildren, Yates prompted, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Will change the world in ways we can't even imagine, Olivia said confidently. They're growing up knowing anything is possible if you're willing to work for it, knowing that every person deserves dignity and opportunity. She squeezed his hand, knowing love can transform even the darkest circumstances. As they walked back to join their guests, Olivia felt a profound sense of completion. The frightened young woman on the auction block could never have envisioned this future children, grandchildren, a school, a legacy of compassion and justice. All because one man had refused to accept the cruelty of his time, had seen her humanity when others saw only profit. I love you, Yates Vega, she said, stopping him with a hand on his arm. For 30 years, I've tried to find the right words to thank you for what you did that day. But there are no words big enough. Yates cupped her face in his weathered hands. You don't need words, Olivia. You've shown your gratitude in every student educated, every child raised, every moment we've shared. He kissed her gently. Besides, I'm the one who should be grateful. You gave purpose to my life when it was just land and cattle and lonely nights. They rejoined the celebration, moving among their guests with the easy grace of people comfortable in their place in the world. As midnight approached and the party showed no signs of winding down, Yates caught Olivia's eye across the yard and nodded toward the house. Understanding his unspoken suggestion, she made her excuses and met him on the porch. Too much excitement for these old bones, he admitted with a chuckle as they slipped inside, leaving the younger generations to continue the festivities. Speak for yourself, old man, Olivia teased, though in truth her feet were aching and a quiet cup of tea before bed sounded heavenly. In their bedroom, as they prepared for sleep, Olivia noticed Yates standing by the window, looking thoughtful. Penny for your thoughts, she said, coming to stand beside him. I was just thinking about that first night you spent here, he replied, in the little room off the kitchen. How worried you looked, how careful I was not to frighten you further. You were a perfect gentleman, Olivia recalled. Unlike most men would have been in that situation. I wanted to court you properly, Yates said, turning to face her, to give you time to heal, to choose freely. And I chose you, Olivia said simply. Best decision I ever made. As they settled into bed, the distant sounds of music and laughter from the ongoing celebration drifting through their window, Olivia reflected on the full circle their lives had taken. From the darkest moment of her life had come everything good: love, family, purpose, community. The cattle auction that had threatened to reduce her to property had instead been the first step on a journey to a life richer than she could have imagined. We should visit the cemetery tomorrow, Yates murmured, already half asleep. Tell Mrs. Abernathy about the party. She'd be pleased in her way. And scandalized by the amount of whiskey consumed, Olivia added with a soft laugh. We'll bring fresh flowers for her grave. They drifted to sleep in each other's arms, as they had nearly every night for 30 years. Outside, the Texas stars shone down on the Vega ranch, on the school that bore their name, on the legacy of love and justice they had built from the most unlikely of beginnings. The auction block was long gone, the auctioneer dead, the corrupt sheriff replaced. But the freedom purchased that day had multiplied 1,000-fold, spreading outward like ripples in a pond, touching lives across generations. One act of courage and compassion had changed not just 2 lives, but hundreds, proof that even in the darkest times, light could find a way through. And that was worth everything.